12's topic is looking at budgeting for financial control, management, and planning, and will introduce principal purposes of budgeting, the major models of budgeting, and the major types of budgeting systems. The differences between budgeting and accounting. Accounting is a financial activity. Accounting and accounting systems are concerned with the past and current condition of a human service agency and its programs. Budgeting is programmatic and a financial activity. Budgeting and budgeting systems are concerned with the present and future condition of a human service agency and its programs. The principal purposes of budgeting include financial control, management, and planning. Financial control purposes tend to overshadow the management and planning purposes. To derive maximum benefits from budgeting, equal importance should be given to financial control, management, and planning. Financial control purposes ensure that agency and program expenses do not exceed agency and program revenues. Revenues are committed when they conform to the approved budget and when proposed expenses work toward the accomplishment of agency or program plans, goals, and objectives. Fiduciary responsibilities are discharged through formal adoption of budgets by governing boards and nonprofit organizations and by appropriate legal authority for governmental organizations. Management purposes of budgeting. Policies, procedures, and processes used to ensure that agency and program resources are expended efficiently to provide the most service or product outputs as possible. Management purposes include ensuring that budgets are implemented as adopted and ensuring that budget revisions are formally approved before significant changes are implemented. Planning purposes of budget also include determining when revenues will be used to achieve what agency or program results, accomplishments, or impacts. The budget is an integral component of a human service agency's planning system. Direction or redirection of revenue should be determined in accordance with agency and program planning priorities. Planning function allows assurances to be given to funding sources that specified target populations will have resources allocated to addressing their needs. Figure 12.1 shows the systems framework and the principal purposes of budgeting. So again, you notice planning purposes extend from inputs all the way through outcomes. Management purposes also extend in the same regard. And then financial control purposes are more related to inputs and activities. Budgeting and the systems framework. The systems framework identifies financial control purposes of budgeting deal with relationship between revenues and expenses or activities. Management purposes of budgeting deal with relationship between revenues, the inputs, and outputs, intermediate outputs, quality outputs, and service completions. Planning purposes of budgeting deal with relationship between revenues, inputs, and agency and program results, the accomplishment or impacts. Major models of the budgetary process include the incremental model, the political model, and the rational planning model. The incremental model views budgetary process and budget decisions as extensions of past budgetary processes and decisions. Agencies and programs are allocated a share of resources based primarily on what they received in previous years, often with a marginal or incremental increase or decrease. The political model views budgetary processes as a negotiation. Budgeting decisions are end products of conflict and compromise between competing stakeholders. Stakeholders attempt to mobilize political and community support for preferred agencies and to ensure that they receive an equitable allocation of community and agency resources. A rational planning model views budgetary process as a set of logical steps tied to community, agency, or program planning that results in budgeting decisions based on needs, priorities, plans, goals, and objectives. Rational planning model also uses data and information as the basis for decision making. It involves a planning process that includes a needs assessment, establishment of community, agency, or program goals and objectives, and linking resources to goals and objectives. There are different types of budgeting systems. Three major types are line item, functional, and program. Figure 12.2 shows the systems framework and the three major types of budgeting systems. So again, you notice how they're all interrelated. The program budgeting system you can see for planning purposes, the functional budgeting system for management purposes. And then you see how each of these relates to the inputs, the activities, the outputs, and the outcomes. And then you note down toward the bottom of the figure here, the line item budgeting system for financial control purposes. that relates to the activities and to the inputs. Line item budgeting systems deal with inputs or revenues and activities, expenses. Financial control is the principal purpose. They represent a plan for where agency or program funds will be secured and how funds will be spent. They deal strictly with monetary issues, and they're not concerned with issues such as the amount of service or product to be produced, the outputs, or the accomplishment of agency on the program goals and objectives. Functional budgeting systems deal with inputs and outputs. Management is the principal purpose. It's concerned with the efficiency and productivity of an agency or program, the ratio of outputs to inputs. New word there, inputs. It should be inputs. Also identified as output budgeting, efficiency budgeting, or productivity budgeting. They represent a plan that includes how much funding will be devoted to individual programs, the amount of service or product program is expected to produce, and the estimated unit cost or cost per output. Program budgeting systems deal with inputs or revenues and the accomplishment of goals and objectives, the outcomes. Planning is a principal purpose, also identified as outcome budgeting or effectiveness budgeting. It's similar to functional budgeting systems, but focus changes from outputs to outcomes. And the program budgeting system identifies the total program cost, the number of outcomes to be achieved, and the unit cost or cost per outcome. Dealing with revenue increases and decreases. Line item, functional, and program budgeting systems provide different perspectives on revenue increases or shortfalls. Effectiveness-based planning requires information provided by functional and program budgeting systems to assess the impact of revenue increases and decreases on the amount of service or product that can be provided and the number of client outcomes that can be achieved. Things that we note in human services agencies and programs today in terms of budgeting, most agencies and programs still rely primarily on line item budgeting systems. Line item, functional, and programming budgeting systems can be seen as components of one comprehensive budgeting system. Functional and program budgeting systems build on line item budgeting. Extending a line item budgeting system to incorporate the concepts needed for functional and program budgeting supports an effectiveness-based approach to human services programs.